I think when history is written, Boris Johnson will be castigated not so much for lying, but for wasting the opportunity that he had with such a large majority in the House of Commons. He could have pushed through serious change. And John Gummer, who is now known as Lord Debon, says that the current party is afraid of making some very tough decisions which need to be made because of electoral reasons. They're afraid of the electorate, so they aren't dealing with climate change. They aren't dealing with oil and gas. It doesn't really matter how many people walk in front of the cars. Nothing is going to happen. Net zero is in the never never. Again, that doesn't really matter either. It doesn't matter who talks about net zero. It's never going to be achieved. It's like zero. You're never going to reach it. And the disputes with the Labour Party and Unite and the various unions, it's going to put Labour in a very weak position to do anything as well. So unless there is a major landslide election at the next election, and unless the next Prime Minister is committed to greening the country, the chances of sorting out climate change, at least for Britain, is very low on the agenda. And I think Gummer is absolutely right. I think this is a fundamental problem of our political system, that we elect people for a very short period of time, 4 to 5 years. And so within the space of 4 years, people are looking towards the ballot box and anxious about whether or not they're going to get re-elected, because they have no other life. And I think maybe we need to go back to the idea that election to the House of Commons particularly is an honour and is something one gives back to society rather than a career path. And I think we need to think very carefully about ways in which we could reform the House of Lords. I've suggested in a previous video, or at least in the comments to the previous video, that a reformed House of Lords which involved some sort of election might be a rolling election where Lords were elected for 10 to 15 years at a time, as and when they retired. But to get that working in the best possible way, it would have to be incrementally introduced now. And so you've got, and Lords would then presumably be linked to a particular electorate and a particular area, unless any given Lord were literally to have a national election, which would be an interesting option. But maybe there would be ways of identifying an electorate that was not exactly the same as the constituency, because that's where the problem would lie. And the proportional representation for larger regions, which we saw with the MEP, simply throws up people like Nigel Farage and some of the grosser members of UKIP. And we don't really want that either in the House of Lords. So it would be a matter of thinking very carefully, is the House of Lords simply going to be a carbon copy of the House of Commons, in which case, why bother? Or is it going to have some sort of permanence? And if that were the case, that would be an interesting solution. But the idea that it is essentially a House composed of cronies of one Prime Minister or another, or those who paid a substantial donation to a political party, that is a travesty worthy of Lloyd George.